July meeting of the, are we on here? Good evening and welcome to the July meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask all of you to stand and join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And next item is the roll call.
Happy to do that. Mr. Jones,
Present.
Mr. Piquel, Mrs. Postlewaite,
Present.
Mr. Lake,
Present.
and Mr. Mundy.
Present. Thank you. Next item is the approval of the June 1st, 2022 minutes. Those were distributed to all of you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. Thank you. Next items are, we have two items which have requested a continuance due to a problem with the notices that were to be given. First item is docket number 2022-40-DSV, D. Giles, 6490 South State Road 267 in Lebanon. Is there a motion to continue that to the August 3rd, 2022 meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is continued. Second continuance request is docket number 2022-41-DSV, the D. Linder, 9199 Brookstone Place, Zionsville. That too needs to be continued due to an issue with the notice to the August 3rd, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to continue that docket?
Move to continue.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is continued to the August 3rd meeting. We also have at least one of the petitioners tonight gave notice by way of first-class mail. Our rules require that it be done by certified mail, but we have amended our rules or waived our rules during the COVID pandemic. And if there is a motion to amend our rules for that tonight, we'll allow all those that have been noticed in using first-class mail.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That is approved. Thank you. We'll now move on to continued business. And let me, before starting the continued business, are there any other petitioners that are here tonight to request a continuance? Seeing none, we will move on to. Yep. Also, we may have people joining us virtually. John, can you tell me, are there anyone online to join us virtually? So there are two online. Thank you. And if you'll wave frantically if they wish to join in any of the conversation at the appropriate time. Thank you. Continued business is docket number 2022-32-DSB. T. Anderson at 401 West Pine Street, Zionsville, Indiana. This is an item which was continued from the June meeting to the July meeting. It was requested as a timely continuance by a remonstrator. Petitions for a development standard variance to provide for a single-family dwelling which, one, exceeds the allowable lot coverage, and two, deviates from the aggregate side yard setbacks in the urban village residential zoning district RV. Is Mr. Anderson or a representative here?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, my name is Gordon Byers, and we had a little technical issue that we're going to try to work through. I showed up early, and we were trying to run a keynote presentation with this map, and we could display it in the rear and on your monitors, but we couldn't display it here. So I think, are you ready?
That's not the right presentation.
Mr. Byers, if
Yes.
you would give your address, please.
Sure.
For the record.
Sure. My address, I'm an attorney, and my address is 298 South 10th Street, Noblesville, Indiana. Gordon Byers, B-Y-E-R-S. I'm here representing both Terry and Laura Anderson. They technically are residing in Dallas, Texas. I'm going to sort of call out numbers here. And we sent a PowerPoint presentation in. Yes. All right. So we're gonna, I want to get everyone's consent. We're gonna move forward. You can see it there and the audience can see it here. And it's a computer speed issue. He has it on power. Do you want to try to run it on PowerPoint or? Okay.
I'll resend it to you. I'll send it.
I'll start off this way. That's meets with everyone's approval.
Sorry to interrupt. We can't, this monitor is not working up here, so I don't know whether there's magic that we're not doing, but
Just have one monitor down there.
yes,
Yeah, and it's not working.
it's not on.
So if you want to change seats, I'm more than happy to share.
Well, it doesn't.
Larry's
there he is.
out.
There he is.
Yeah.
It works. I can go through I'm fine with the drawing.
Is it as simple as, John, is it as simple as taking one of these monitors that's not being used and moving it down here?
Nothing is ever simple. Couldn't be that. Simple. Okay,
That's how you follow along.
okay. We'll manage. Thank you.
I'm here representing the Andersons, young couple, 38-ish, live in Dallas, want to come to Zionsville. The reason their brother, who's here in the audience, lives here, so he's enticed them to some of the great characteristics of Zionsville. So they acquired this lot at 401 West Pine, right at the intersection of 4th Street and Pine, and acquired it and are desiring to construct a single-family home for themselves and their 2 children to move to Dallas. And the variances are, simply put, developmental standards variance for lot coverage and developmental standards variance for aggregate side yard. And I know I won't bore you with the standards, but as you know, we have to show reasonable evidence that it doesn't affect the general welfare, health, safety, welfare, substantially doesn't impair use and value of adjacent property, and a strict application of the zoning ordinance is a practical difficulty. Now, the 2 variances are primarily, this is the lot here, I'll show you. It's lot 2 right back here. It's about 64 feet by 140, comparable in size to the lot here and this lot. The lot next door to the west is 20 feet wider, so it appears larger. So the Anderson's lot, 62 by 140, typical of lot size in this area. It's a replat. It has an irregular shape sanitary sewer easement on the west side that you can hopefully see. It's got proposed drainage easement, 10 foot on the rear. And I'll go through some of this, but it's typical. It's 0.22 acres, 62 feet by 140. Now, these two developmental standards variances are a result of the driveway. Everything, I'm gonna flash there. Everything in connection with the house is in full compliance, but it's when staff looks at the driveway, their interpretation of the ordinance is that a driveway is defined as from public right-of-way or rear alley to front building line. It's this driveway that goes the length of the lot that generates the lot coverage issue. But to go back to that, the house is about 3,000 square feet. It totals, I think, 3,400 because it's got a 300-foot covered patio and a front porch. But typically it's 42 feet by 67 plus a 12-foot garage. So it's a narrow, long house, but it meets the ordinance. It's 34.9 as far as lot coverage. It's the culprit of the driveway by staff's interpretation of being extended. And the reason the driveway is extended is that the Andersons felt that was appropriate to rear load the garage. I don't know, I always hesitant to say this because I did this once and every member of the BZA had a front load garage. So I don't want to critique front load garages, but the thought was it's a better aesthetic and a good aesthetic for the village. And I think staff agreed in their report that we're rear loading the garage on this type of a lot. And so the driveway runs the full length. And your ordinance, just to go through it, says that in lot coverage calculations, you don't look at the driveway. It's excluded. But staff felt that this was what's called a super driveway. So they calculated it. Technically, the front part of the driveway doesn't count. So the lot coverage ratio is about, the engineer put 60%, it's about 58% when you count the driveway in. But the house, again, is within the confines of 34.5. The other variance also is triggered by the driveway. And on this slide, you can see the driveway comes in and your ordinance says that you have to have an aggregate of 15 feet. We have 5 feet permanent on the east, and on this side, the driveway goes down to 5 feet. So there we're in violation of the aggregate of 15. Back here, the driveway is within the ordinance. So the last 35% of the southern part of this lot is in compliance. It's the front that narrows down to 5 feet. So 5 feet on both sides, that's 10. Now, the thing to point out, I want to point out, it's hard to see, but the driveway is the trigger.
Mr. Byers, we won't pick you up when you leave the microphone. Thank you.
I appreciate your record. The house, at this point, the narrowest point of the house right in this area is 12 feet. So the house is sufficient to comply with the aggregate. It's 5 feet plus 12, it's 17. But it's the count of the driveway that triggers the need for the second variance. There are requests for 2 variances. The driveway is the culprit in both, though. I guess I want to kind of go over that. It's only when we have staff's interpretation that we're going to count this driveway because it's a little different than the definition of the ordinance. And it's the driveway that causes the aggregate to be decreased. But if you look solely at the house, it's in compliance. The house dimensions of the east and the west is fully in compliance with the ordinance also. Now, the Andersons, I think, put some thought in their design of this, and they felt that it's appropriate, I think, to rear load the garage. And the garage, there are some side loaded garages and other rear loaded garages in the area of the village. So I don't want to critique it, but in a way, the need for the variance is because, in their opinion, they're trying to make the house more aesthetically pleasing from the front. And here's an elevation. I think you can see it. This is the front of the house and the west side of the house. So west elevation, this elevation, the lot owner, I think, is here this evening. The Cronins are on the west side, and this is the elevation they'll see. This is the front elevation. Brick ledge, brick rack, metal roof. And I think they feel it's an appropriate design. Okay, this elevation is the rear of the house with the rear facing garage right here. So 3-car garage facing south, facing the rear. This is the east elevation that Mr. McCauley will see on the east. It has a, well, it has a, just counting the lot calculation, the house again is in compliance, but it has a covered patio out there with a fireplace. So the patio's counted. When we calculate the house with 34.9, we're calculating the porches and the patios, but that patio is enclosed with a roof, so it counts. And I think, to paraphrase staff in the report, I know you've looked at it, they think that the layout sort of the rear loaded garage and the utility easements on the lot make this a reasonable design and a reasonable layout for, and it sort of has what I think they use the word village character. The issue, and I'll show you some pictures here real quick. This is the lot, and this lot, the main concerns, the elephant in the room, we had a continuance, and we met with both property owners, property owner to the east and the property owner to the west. We met them on site, walked through their concerns, listened to what their issues were, and primarily their issues were drainage. They felt like, drainage has not been great, and like every reasonable person, when something develops next to you, you think, well, what's this going to do to me, and how does this affect drainage? So I want to give you that, show you the lot, but their main concerns were drainage, and we met with them, listened to what they thought, and then we met with the Public Works Department and the town engineer to come up with what we think are some proposals to tender a drainage plan that makes it appropriate for this house to go into this lot. Now, here's the thing I want to tell you from 10,000 feet. I'm no engineer, but I've done this a long time. This lot from the north, this is a picture of the north, from the north to the south has 6 feet of fall. And so a 6-foot person, this from the sidewalk area, the road curb area to the rear, got 6 feet of fall. The other thing that this lot has, that when we show you the drainage plan, this lot currently has 4 drainage structures on it. 4 drainage, you're looking at one right here. It has a drainage structure in the northwest corner, one in the northeast corner, one in the rear, 2 in the rear. And we're going to add another one after meeting with the Public Works Department. And we're going to place a swale on the east, a driveway and swale on the west, and a swale on the rear. And we feel with, I'll show you the lot real quick, but we feel with those 5 drainage structures, and again, remember this lot is 64 feet by 140.22 acres. Now, I'm not trying to be funny, but we've got a small lot with 5 drainage structures. These are stormwater structures that are piped. And a lot of them were put there when the town made improvements in 2018. I talked to your public works department. You made these improvements, but the neighbors raised concerns because there's still some water issues. And we think we've got a way to make some modifications to those to actually improve it. So there's one of the drainage structures. This is the northwest corner looking south. This is the east property line, north looking south. This is another drainage structure you can see there. People in the audience, this is the drainage structure here. That's just a picture of the lot, north to south. Same thing. That's looking back to the northwest. You see, now, one thing we're going to do as part of our drainage plan that we're going to tender to you and make a commitment and a condition of our approval. This drainage structure right here, we're going to change the elevation on that and perhaps curb it because the water velocity is kind of, the town made this improvement, but it's like a lot of things. The water velocity at peak rain will sheet over that. The surface water will sheet drain over that. So we're going to attempt to change elevation on that and curb it. And that's after we consult with your town engineer and your Department of Works. They think that will be an improvement that will substantially catch some of the water. And I want to be clear on drainage. We've got apples and oranges. We think completely this site, we can handle the surface water from the structure, the 3,000 square foot structure and the driveway. The issue here and what the neighbors' concerns are when they talk to us is the off-site water coming because of elevations coming down 4th Street, coming east and west and going over the sidewalk. This is a lower area of the village. So it's the off-site water that we're attempting to make some refinements to handle. We clearly can handle the on-site water, the on-site drainage, but we're going to try to improve the site. Now, this is our neighbor, the Cronins here this evening. This is their lovely house to the west. And the reason I show this is our house on this lot will be substantially the same elevation. You know, you hate for people to come in and build new stuff, dig a basement, throw all the dirt up, put this big monster house up and just say, here, look at this. We're going to set our house elevation just almost exactly the same elevation as the house to the west. And the reason I show this, we're going to drop our garage, probably 3 stairs like this garage is dropped, disappeared. This garage is dropped. There's stairs down into the garage. So the garage floor from the main floor is down. That's how our garage will be placed on our lot. So the reason I show the Cronins, they're paying me extra since they're here this evening to show their house, but it's going to be substantially, there's their house again from our lot. So our house will elevate about the exact same. Our porches will line up and our garage elevation will be about the same and the house elevation will be about the same. And there's a picture of a drainage structure, hard to see, but it's located back there. There's one over here and there's one there. So there's 2 in the rear. And this will be a swaled area back here. That's in our drainage plan. When we talk to the town works department. Now, this is the Cronin's house. And this is the Cronin's house, the house to the west. And I show you their house. They got a nice driveway. And our elevation, again, is going to be substantially the same as this. And our driveway will be probably exactly sort of at the same level. It'll be on this side of the house, the left-hand side of that house. But you see how they've got a nice driveway that goes back, side loads their garage. Our driveway will be substantially similar. It'll go a little farther because our garage will rear load, but it's substantially going to be, it's not that we're copying their product, but we're going to be substantially in alignment with their house. Now, this is the southeast corner. It's low, but there's a drainage structure right there. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about the drainage improvements we're going to make. We're going to add we're going to have double drainage structures back here This is Mr. McCauley's lot on the other side of the fence. So we'll have on this rear swale, we're going to meet with the town engineer and the Department of Public Works and field locate that extra drainage structure. Now, I want to go back to our drainage. This is sort of a summation, and in meeting with the McCauley's and Cronin's, I respect, they wanted something in writing, and I think it's 100% correct. These are our commitments that we've tendered, that what we intend to do, that the Andersons will construct retaining curbs around the one inlet. On the eastern line, they'll install a 5-foot drainage swale equal to or lower than adjacent property, and install an emergency overflow in the southwest quadrant. And that's going to be field located. Now, so in summation, we're going to improve the 4 inlets that are there. The northwest, we're going to add curbing. We may re-elevate the northeast. We're going to install a new one on the southeast, and we'll end up with 5 outlets. Now, the thing that we're going to do important to the east property is we're going to maintain, if I can show you, we're going to maintain the grade going down through there. And what that means, I think you probably had this explained to you. We're not going to raise, the house will be set at a certain elevation to match the property to the west. But on this side, we'll drop what's called the brick ledge. So we'll maintain substantially the same elevation of dirt going back, so we have a swale to capture that 6-foot drop. So we'll create a 5-foot drainage easement. It'll have 3 structures in it to capture the water that's coming from off-site that'll shoot back through this location. And what we do there, this house has got a brick wrap. We just cheat the brick ledge. In other words, the brick ledge goes down. So on the west side, the brick ledge might be 3.5 feet. On the east side, it might be 5.5 to hold the ground elevation and not stick the house up in the air, cause surface water to flow on the neighbor to the east. So that's a summation of what their concerns were. And we think after meeting with the town, Public Works and the engineer on site. Now, the other thing that I'm committing, and I told the Cronins this, to safe harbor this, we'll commit and make part of your approval that when we get the basement set, we'll meet on site. We're going to meet on site with the Works Department director and the town engineer to set these new structure. The new structure we're going to add at our expense. We'll meet on site to set that, and we'll meet, and I'll notify the east property owner and the west property owner of that meeting, and they can attend it also. And if they've got questions or concerns or say, this lawyer talks great, but what about this? What about that? So we're committing that we're going to field locate these improvements and make these adjustments. And again, these adjustments, respectfully, we contend those are to handle this off-site water that's coming in. And I have no doubt that that happens when there's big events, but we think when this house is elevated and the drainage will be controlled by guttering and underground piping with these structures, we can handle the site water and the off-site water, and we'll make these improvements. So with that, I can only tell you that the Andersons are, really excited to come to Zionsville. They've been sort of brainwashed by their brother and they've sort of fallen in love with it. So they're anxious, but we respect the need for the variance. It is, if I blame anything, I can blame the driveway, but I think the benefit is this rear load garage. I think it's better than a front load garage on this lot. So with that, I think it's more productive to respond to your questions. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Mr. Byers. Questions for the petitioner's representative?
I have a question, and you mentioned that you'll be able to handle well the on-site water. What we're talking about here is, if I read this correctly, 62.8% hardscape on that piece of property. Some of that, as you mentioned, will be guttered and underground piping. What about this large driveway? That will be hard material, porous material? What's the plan?
And we talked to your engineer, and I think their desire is to make it hard material. Now, they'll have a contractual obligation if there's a repair. It's a sewer easement. They have a contractual obligation. I think your town engineer and public works will say the coefficient of runoff on gravel versus concrete or asphalt is substantially equal. The gravel might slow it down a little, but it doesn't really, once not as permeable as you think. So it will be. And the driveway is 15 feet by 130 feet, but it'll take advantage of that 6-foot fall and slope to the rear at a reasonable grade. So we think we're going to obviously handle that. The guttering system on the house, some of the water on this house will actually flow back to the front. The house plan here, I'd say the 30% of the house plan, if you look at the drainage plan that we submitted to the town, 30% flows back north, just because it's the way the roof will drain off. So we think it's more than sufficient with these, not to be cute, but we've got 5 outlets. And
Just for the record, those are inlets.
inlets. I said outlets.
Yeah.
Inlets.
Just so that's correct in the record.
I'm from Noblesville, so I apologize. With this roof pitch,
So I'm sorry, just to be clear, and you sort of stated over the, north to south runoff. So your assumption is that anything that runs off that driveway to the south will be taken in by these inlets that you intend to put at the back, at that side of that end of the property. Is that what I understand?
There's two there now at the rear. So the 2 at the rear, we're gonna add one on the southeast corner, but there'll be a 10-foot, 9.5-foot swale at the rear, and there'll be 2 outlets there. And our driveway elevation will have sufficient slope to take the water to the rear and handle it at the rear 10-foot drainage easement that's on the rear. There's a 10-foot drainage easement on the rear of this lot. So the water from that driveway, some will go to the front, but the majority of it will go to the rear because of this fall, similar to that driveway I showed you on the house to the west.
So essentially, while you have 62% of the site that will drain into the storm sewer system, which is more than what it's designed to handle, you will not be pushing water onto adjacent properties.
Yeah, that's correct. In other words, in Indiana, just the builder could, number one, be sued. Number two, it's a common enemy doctrine. We may not collect and unnaturally discharge water. We'd be sued. And your drainage plan has been reviewed by your public works department and the engineer. So, and we're at, with the driveway, we're about 58%, but we're confident we're not going to shove water east or west. We're going to take water north to south and put it in these drainage structures.
And the inlet that you'll be adding
Yes.
at the the southeast corner, that will be similar to what is already there in terms of capacity.
Yes.
And it will flow into the storm sewer that exists back there.
Yes. And the one that's on Mr. McCauley's property's got a little right angle in it. We're going to straighten that out and add that other inlet on our property, southeast quadrant, so it'll improve the efficiency of any water that would get to that southeast quadrant of the lot. And it is connected into the system. And I don't think to be clear, this system doesn't surcharge. It's the front structures have been overrun by velocity, and we're going to attempt to tweak that. The 2018 improvement, we're going to make those adjustments to that. That's why we met with the neighbors and met with the Board of Works. So we think the issue is the offsite water, and we think we have a solution to adjust to that. We can clearly handle the onsite water.
So I'm just out of curiosity, when you say we, I'm assuming that's not part of your skill set. Who has been helping you to design these these solutions to the drainage
We have
problem?
a PE engineer that signed off on the drainage plan that was filed with the town. That's part of those plans. And the builder, and also the Board of Works and the town engineers also looked at that. And we're gonna field check that when we're into construction. So, in other words, this drainage plan, it wasn't just made up by me, it was approved and consented to, I think. I think Suzanne can maybe confirm that. It was consented to or reviewed by the Public Works and the town engineer. So we have a PE, there is actually a drainage plan in there and the PE signed off on it. It's based on elevations of the basement, shows arrows where the drains will go, and it's, you know, the only thing we're changing is we're adding a new structure and we're adding these swales and making sure the swales are defined. But again, the thing we've got going for us is 6 feet of fall.
For the record, we don't have a drainage plan in our packet, so
Well,
we don't have a plan. We
Right.
have a written narrative.
We have a narrative and there are the 3 points that
Actually, there
you
is,
you plan to make.
That's not got all these improvements on it.
We
though.
got-
No, it doesn't have the improvements.
Yeah,
there's a plan in here. If I, give me 1 second.
it's just not updated with your written narrative.
It's the final one with Suzanne that says drainage plan that has arrows on it that shows it's so old, it's hard to see this.
I do. You can't read it. It does, even the PDF doesn't scale. It's blurry.
It's a PDF and it appears as blurry. We submitted one. Suzanne, you,
Yes, it's in the petitioner's materials. It's not an exhibit, but it's in the petitioner's materials, and it looks like a,
Yeah, you just can't read it.
You
Even
can't
when you
read
blow
it.
it up in PDF, it doesn't, it's not readable.
there
It's just one.
there
big
it is
blurry
right here.
mess.
Let me try to blow it up. This is it. This is the one that the PE signed off on. I'll try to blow it up.
And am I correct, though, that that does not have these new commitments in that plan?
It doesn't have the drainage structure in it, but it's
Okay.
got the other structures and it
Okay.
shows the drainage format for the elevation of the house, that
Okay.
right there, signed by the PE.
It just affects the motion is why I'm asking.
Pardon me?
It affects how we make the motion
Oh, I understand.
is why I'm asking.
But you're right, the new structure in the narrative, we're gonna have 5 structures, there are 4 there now, we're gonna add the 5th.
Okay.
And so I think it would be appropriate maybe to approve the drainage plan narrative and incorporate this into it, know that it'll be amended before we get a building permit.
Any other questions for petitioner's representative? Thank you, Mr. Byers.
Thank you.
Are there any residents here to speak for or against this petition? Or are there any online? No?
Okay. Yeah. Please do.
If you'd state your name and address, please, for the record.
Yeah, Ryan McCauley. I'm next door at 375 West Pine Street. Can I use your laser?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so my issue is capacity. So currently there's a 5-foot wide emergency overflow on my side of the property. And with the house 5 feet from the property line, how does the capacity of the current emergency overflow compare to this plan? And this doesn't have any kind of description of inlets or what that physically would look like or compare to or quantitatively to what's there today. As far as the actual variances, I don't really agree with the driveway being included. My only concern here is drainage. And again, capacity for current lot and the actual numbers going across to the new plan. And that's really it.
So I'm not a PE, but what it would appear is that there's very little property that would shed water into that drainage ditch. So you'd actually probably have less water than what is there today. Most of
Yes.
it will be contained and routed to storm inlets is what it appears.
Yeah, so generally speaking, the improvements done in 2017 and the curbs put in, I believe, 2018 have done a tremendous job. The issue is the water that doesn't run across the street today, but the water that runs across the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I think one commitment was to add some sort of structure to include that curb, that first curb there. That will definitely help. But the bigger issue is the water across the sidewalk. And that is not, I mean, that would go to the emergency overwater flow, right? Which today, there's not a lot of water. It goes to their property and it slowly absorbs, right? With the house there, it's gonna pool somewhere. It's gonna wanna go. It's gonna use these swales. At least I'm not a PE, I'm not a civil engineer, but that water's gonna go somewhere, right? So I mean, that's my biggest concern is just the capacity when you get a big rain, how does it compare to the current structures? And that's what we don't have, but there's been no, at least I have not seen any kind of report, review, number on a quantitative basis, how it compares, other than some generic lines on a sheet of paper of what the current slope is. And then the other thing too is where's all this dirt going? Right, we're putting in a pretty big house, pretty big basement. This dirt is gonna go somewhere. And Gordon did point out that the slope is literally 6 feet. If you look at the patio of the neighbors, which is going to be the new grade, I mean, it's probably 5 feet. So that dirt is going to affect the surrounding area,
Well,
especially only 5 feet on one side.
I mean, if they're trying to do what is on this plan, that dirt's gonna have to go off-site. They're gonna have to get rid of it. Like, there's no way to,
I know,
there's literally no space to put that dirt on.
and
this
correct me
site.
if I'm wrong, I believe the plan somewhere in there, it actually states all dig, I forget what the legal terminology is, but will stay on the site. So I agree. The concern is that paperwork has stated that it's physically on there. She agrees. Yeah, I think that's all I have. But just to summarize, I don't think the driveway should be included in the overall coverage. The issue is all about, there's a new structure, what does that do to the water? And it's the water across the sidewalks, not the street, and then capacity for the current overflow that's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. And I think we want to make certain that all concerns are heard. But I appreciate your comments about the problem is the part of it is the calculation of lot coverage. Yes, sir.
It's Jason Cronin at 415 West Pine, Zionsville, the neighbor to the west. So I'd say from our concerns, the drainage as well. It's not so much the driveway or the aggregate coverage. I think from the west side neighbors, that's not so much a problem. If we do feel like 60% or 62% coverage or whatever is a concern with the hardscape, then I think from our perspective, we would request as part of the condition to approve the aggregate variance for the setback, that there be some sort of a hard border around a more permeable surface, if that makes sense, right? So not a gravel drive that continues to grow and further encroach on the setback to our side on the west, if that makes sense. But again, saying that we're not opposed to the driveway being part of the coverage, and the improvements they've proposed in terms of drainage on the west side of the property makes sense to us. And we're actually excited to have somebody do something with the lot. I appreciate the comments for our patio, but we've waited multiple years to actually landscape and fix the patio, waiting for what's going to happen on the other side of the lot. So we're actually looking forward to something getting started back there.
You said you're on the west side, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're slightly higher
Correct.
than this lot for the most part.
Correct, yes, but the driveway, as described, there will be a swale on their side of the lot line and take the water off of the driveway, right? And we feel like that addresses any kind of water drainage we might have on our side.
Any other questions for Mr. Cronin? Thank you.
My name is John Townsley. I live at 305 West Pine Street, about, I'm the third lot away from this lot. I've been a resident of Zionsville in the village since 1978, in my current home since 1982. You have received, I hope, the letter I wrote and have had time to examine it. I appreciate you taking time to do so. As I indicated in the letter, several of the things in it might change depending upon what was presented tonight. And I am reminded of Mark Twain when he said the problem with communication is language. I am encouraged by what I see, and what I've heard, but I haven't seen it. You apparently have documents that have not been on file, or at least on any file available to the public, because I checked this afternoon. And so while these things all sound fine and well, as an attorney for 45 years, I found that sometimes people will say things and somehow it doesn't get translated onto the paperwork. But on the other hand, you are professionals and much more skilled at this than I am. So actually, I've got some questions of you. Do I understand that you have a drainage plan signed by a professional engineer in your file?
In the petition, yes.
Yes, we do. There is also a narrative in there of the commitments that they have made. That is not signed by anyone. It is just a listing of the commitments that they've made.
This was not in the packet, the list of commitments.
Okay, no, I haven't
This was
seen
not-
those either, but that would have
This
been
was
nice.
given to us today.
But the
Yes.
drainage plan that we have is
The
not,
drainage plan was in the packet.
but it is not signed by a professional, a PE that I have seen. Is it a report from a PE?
It is. It's got their stamp in the bottom
Okay.
corner.
Yeah, what I was hoping for, and perhaps it's there, is something along the lines of, not as extensive, because Christian Union Church was something more, but something along the lines where a professional engineer would assure my neighbors that, yeah, this drainage is going to work. You know, if you tell me that it will, then I guess, and I'll say reluctantly, defer to your judgment. I'm curious though, on the swales, does it have any call for how deep the swales will be? And do I understand correctly, there'll be a swale on the east, west, and south side?
So number 2 of this document says, create the eastern property line drainage easement area to create a 5-foot drainage swale, which I believe to be the width, that is not stated in here, equal to or lower than the adjacent property area, or adjacent property in the area from the sidewalk at Pine Street to the south end of the lot, as an emergency overflow route. So hopefully taking that water coming over the sidewalk and catching that.
Okay, so
It
that was
does
just-
not give a depth.
And so that's just eastern, or is that
That's
all
on the
three?
eastern, and then it has, add a new stormwater drainage structure on the southeast side of the property to be field located at the direction of the Department of Public Works. And then it already has, it notes on here, it already has 4 drainage inlets. It'll now have 5 based on what number 3 says. And then I believe the drainage plan itself currently has a swale in the back.
Okay, in the back. So there's nothing on the western side then.
Uh,
And the reason I ask that, is there any swale on the western?
There'll be a swale on the west side with the driveway. It'll be field engineered. It'll be approved by the town engineer and director for the works we talked to on the drainage plan.
And
Suggested.
is that a part of your drainage plan currently?
What?
Having the swale on the western side?
Well, if it's not clear, we'll add it as a commitment, swale on the western side.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
And there's a swale, there's existing 10-foot drainage easement on the rear with 2 structures. There'll be 2 structures on the rear, 2 structures on the east, and 1 structure on the west.
Okay, good. Good, well, if that could be reduced to some sort of written commitment, again, another homily that I live by is Reagan to Gorbachev, trust but verify. Also on the water, I understand, I would assume that the water from the basement that may accumulate after a storm or just perhaps because of natural water conditions will be drained to an inlet as opposed to directed to your neighbor's property.
Of course, I think your public works department will ensure that there'll be a sump system and it will go to a swale or inlet. And we've even talked to the public works department about routing. I'm not going to quote that, but we talked about routing the downspouts and the sump to the storm structure if they want to do that. But it's their decision because it's in their jurisdiction. It's their fault.
And I think I'd also note that there's going to be apparently a hard surface driveway that's going to be on both the west side and also behind this. I hear what you're saying when you say the coefficient of drainage or whatever it may have been is the same between concrete and gravel, but frankly, that just doesn't seem to make sense.
It is.
It is. So why do you give any sort of lot density for using a material that will drain no better than concrete?
It's like 1% or 2% better. It's not, it is virtually the same. Your benefit comes from a permeable paver system with a sand bed.
Okay. The other thing I would suggest is that the percentage is being given on the basis of a 10 by 10 patio. I would suggest to you that maybe you ought to re-examine that and give it on the basis of how large the area using permeable materials is going to be. I looked out on my sandbox before I came over here. It's about 10 by 10. And I was thinking, I get this percentage off for putting in something that's about the size of my sandbox. And instead of sand, maybe I put a little gravel on top and I'll claim the percentage. So, and I may be too cynical there, but that might be something to look into.
It's something certainly for future zoning changes.
I would hope on the new zoning code. Now, there are two other issues that I'd like to address. And basically the one is the density. It's been my observation, and believe it or not, I've been watching you usually by Zoom for some time. I have the benefit of being able to sit in my basement in my pajamas or whatever I may want to as I observe you. You guys have to get dressed up. But what I've observed for some time in these meetings is this board has been reluctant to grant anything at or over 50% density. And in this case, you're being asked to grant density of 62.8. That concerns me, not necessarily so much because of this, but because of the precedent it's going to set. Back when I was doing professional licensing law, trying to get licenses back to doctors and other people, one of the first things I would do after I got my retainer was I would go over to the professional licensing board and I would go through everything they'd done for the past year or two, looking for the exception. And I would use that. And it worked very well. I'd suggest to you here, you have excellent attorneys who appear before this board with long memories, and you are going to have to revisit various iterations of this problem, whether it's for a driveway or whatever, ad infinitum. I would suggest there may be that if you're not going to turn down this variance, that you might address it as part of the new zoning code, because I think given what you may do tonight, you are going to set potentially a very bad precedent for attorneys who will go through and find it and use it. The last part is, again, drawing on my experience back when I was a practicing attorney, I'm more retired these days than not. When I would put in easements and developments, I didn't cross them. I remember up the Dow Lanco property, you're all probably familiar with that, and you know all the gas lines go through that. At one point, I represented a client who was going to put a convention center up there. And we could not cross their gas lines except diagonally, and not very much, and not very often. And yet here I see there are, what, 2 sewer easements? Or no, 2 sewers, there's 1 sewer easement. And then on the initial file that was done in this, they show a sewer located within 5 foot, apparently without an easement. Now, maybe I've read that wrong. but that's what I read from the initial plan. So does it make sense from a public policy standpoint to cover over sanitary sewers? And does it make sense? I think there's also a drainage utility easement in the back. There's obviously the sewer that's on the west. I guess I am surprised to see a request that would cover so much of those easements and also the sanitary sewer. If you look at, I believe it was item 3 in my letter, you can see the extent to which the sewer and the drainage utility and easement are covered. Is that good public policy? So I'll try not to drag this on. And I appreciate your service and your consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Towsley. Just a quick response. We do put roadways over utilities. And in this case, the prospective homeowner would be liable for the cost of tearing up a driveway to access that. So is it the wisest thing to do? I think anyone would say, no, if you can avoid it, certainly don't do it. But it is not it would not be at residents' expense. It would be at the homeowner's expense if there were a need to access that. So thank you for your comments. No one online? Okay, thank you. Staff report, please.
Yes, I'll try to cover what was requested here. I'll start with the drainage because I'm going to try to keep that at the base level as I'm not an engineer. I know that the petitioner and surrounding residents had conversations with DPW. And from what DPW has relayed to me at a preliminary, they're okay with what's being proposed. However, they have not submitted a formal request for approval or anything like that. If, let's say, the BZA approves this request, they would still have to get an encroachment agreement with DPW for the driveway to be in that easement. Just with BZA approval doesn't mean that that would get 100% approved. Further, they would also have to get a stormwater permit before they could get their building permit. So that's what I can say about the drainage concerns. There was a drainage report signed by an engineer in the packet. However, the commitments I think I just received today. I would say if it were to be approved, that approval would be subject to approval by the city engineers and Department of Public Works. Going into the various requests that are here before us. Traditionally, as the petitioner stated, we haven't counted driveways towards lot coverage. Staff felt that based on the excess of the driveway and it not being typical in the village, and on the definition that in this case it would be appropriate to count the driveway towards the lot coverage. It also doesn't meet the aggregate, as you all know, the driveway is required to meet that 5-foot setback. Therefore, I think there's a 10-foot aggregate with the driveway. With that said, staff is in favor of the request just due to the unique configuration of the lot and feel that it fits the character of the surrounding lots, and understand that lot coverage and driveway is probably something we need to look at in the future zoning ordinances. And with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So ironically, the two houses on either side have a similar garage and driveway configuration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not uncommon in that particular area.
Correct. And possibly, I don't know. I mean, I didn't do a full calculation of.
Yeah, I don't know if the
So
percentage
driveway-
matches up, but I mean, just going all the way to the back,
Sure.
they're similar.
We typically do not see the driveway in any calculation, and oftentimes when it's an addition, we know that we're there is a driveway in most cases. We don't know what it is 62%. Will that set a new record? Or are there others that are at 62% or more? Yeah.
It's right next door. It's the same.
I couldn't tell you 100% that have gone through BZA, but I would think possibly there are probably lots in the village that are over 60% if you count the driveways.
Well, again, we don't usually see that because it's not counted. So,
Yeah.
Correct.
I guess typically we weren't aware it was a staff discretion whether or not the driveway got included or not. We've always kind of excluded it. Now we've gone after sidewalks and pools and everything else. I would like to address real quickly this, it constantly shows up in our meetings, the term density. I think we're quite aware, or density and lot coverage are not one and the same. Density is typically what is considered what you visually see in terms of the size of the structures that are on any given parcel of land. Lot coverage is the hard surface that covers the lot. Lot coverage is what affects drainage for both their property, the neighbor's property, and even the design of our storm sewers and everything else that we have going on. But density is a different term, and so they're not interchangeable. They do get interchanged quite often, but they are two substantially different issues. The only other item I'd add to this, and just to make sure the owner and builder are aware of it, and even the adjoining neighbors, you dig a hole, when the hole will attract the water. So as much as there's a certain amount of water coming down the street and over the sidewalk, its goal is going to be to get to that basement. We face this at the house behind, what's the carpet distributor in?
Oh, yeah.
Cleghorn.
Yeah.
Cleghorn.
And it was they were definitely the low spot in the road. And I know we went through a lot of work to make sure that with their site and the way they handled the water on site, it was given the best option to get off. I don't know if they followed through and how they treated their own construction process, but the word of the wise would be to oversize that, because that is where the water is going to go. But generally, it sounds like they've worked through a set of the details to handle water coming off their site and also coming onto their site from other sources.
Any other comments from the board? And Mr. Byers, I think you said that you were, if the lot owners would be willing to make the commitment that you have made tonight in terms of the drainage improvements. I think there were some things which have been discussed which are not part of the narrative of the drainage plan. And there has been a comment made, at least by one, that said the dirt that you take out of there to put a basement in is going to have to leave the lot. And I believe that in some place in this packet, it did indicate that that dirt was going to be used to grade the lot once the home was built. But I think you also said that the home would be placed no higher than the home to the east. Is that correct?
Home to the west, right. It's substantially the same elevation as Mr. Cronin's house and his garage to the west. Right. And I'll commit, the one thing I think we've added, we're going to put a swale in the west. We're committing to meet, and to back up a little bit, we'll take dirt off of the site by truck. Now, the irony is Mr. Cronin actually wants a little dirt. He needs a little dirt, so I've committed to him. We're going to give him some dirt on his patio, but the excess dirt, we don't just dig a 10-foot hole and stack the house up. We set the house elevation, the drainage plan will be approved by your engineer and your board of works. We'll haul the excess dirt off. We use custom concrete, the best basement builder. They know how to perimeter drains and make sure the surface, 2 sump pits. And the other thing I'd point out, the capacity of this, we've checked capacity with your board of works or your public works and your engineer. There's sufficient capacity in these systems to handle 500-year events. So we're not surcharging the outlets, structures, and we're going to add the one. So we'll commit to, and we also, Suzanne's correct, we have to have an encroachment permit from the Public Works Department. But one last thing I want to say is your ordinance, and I'm not critiquing it, but it says no driveway. And you as a Board of Zoning Appeals, when you make a decision, you're not bound by it. It's not precedent. Unlike Mr. Towsley, it's not case law precedent. You uniquely make decisions based upon facts in front of you. It's not, there's no legal argument that the Board of Zoning Appeals granted a 58% driveway coverage ratio, therefore it's a slam dunk for us. It's not the law in the state that Board of Zoning Appeals are quasi-judicial. You make fact findings and legal decisions based upon the facts presented to you. It's not binding commitment. But it appears, again, the elephant in the room is the drainage, and we're committed to work with our engineer, the town's engineer, and the Public Works Department, and our neighbors, Mr. McCullough and Mr. Cronin, to put in place drainage to handle our site and to handle off-site water. And we think we've got a plan. Again, we've got 5 structures, and we've got swales on the east, swales on the west, and swales in the rear, and 2 structures in the front that we're going to tweak and fine tune and change the grade and curb to collect this. We're going to better the improvement the town made in 2018. I think everyone agrees that the 2018 project went a long way on improving some of the drainage issues, but we're going to improve it even more at our expense. So we commit to the drainage narrative. We commit to the adding the swale. We commit to, we have to get an encroachment permit. We're simply asking you for a variance of the lot coverage and the aggregate side yard. So with that, I'll be quiet. Respond.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the board? Is there a motion?
I can try it if you want.
Did you make enough notes?
I did.
All right.
I move that docket number 2022-32-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for an increase of lot coverage up to 62.8%. For the construction of a single-family dwelling, driveway, and accessory uses for the property located at 401 West Pine Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, be approved as filed based on the findings of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted plans and concepts, including the document entitled Drainage Plan Drainage Improvements that was provided to the BZA at this evening's hearing, with a 4th drainage improvement being added, which would be the swale along the western side of the property, and that the final drainage plan be subject to approval by the city engineer and DPW.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is approved.
And then I would move that docket number 2022-32-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for a deviation from the aggregate side yard setback to 10 feet for the construction of a single-family dwelling, driveway, and accessory uses for the property located at 401 West Pine Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RV, be approved as filed based upon the findings of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans and concepts.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you to the homeowners who were here tonight to express your concern and working with the prospective new neighbors. Thank you, Mr. Byers.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Suzanne for her assistance throughout the process. Thank you.
Next item is docket number 2022-35-UV, Waltham's Garden Center at 795 South US Highway 421 in Zionsville. This is a petition which was continued from the June 1st meeting. Is there a representative for the Waltham's project here?
There is. Good evening, Chairperson Mundy, members of the board. Joe Calderon, attorney with offices at 11 South Meridian, Indianapolis, representing Altum's tonight. I was pulled into this after the case was continued, so I've only been involved for a couple of weeks, and I'm very grateful for the guidance that Suzanne and Roger Kilmer have provided these couple of weeks that I've been involved. I'm going to be pretty brief because this is a use variance and not really site plan sensitive so much. We do have a development plan petition pending before the Plan Commission that would be scheduled to be heard on the 18th of this month should this variance go forward. I am not supplementing the materials that found their way into the packet. I think they speak for themselves as far as how the property is proposed to be used, which is very similar to how it's been used by Altum's these past 2 years on temporary variances. This is property that's essentially shared with Finley Creek, located at 421 and Taylor Avenue. This property would be accessed by Taylor Avenue only. Now, interestingly, the property is zoned rural general industrial because all of it was carved out of the landfill, which is kind of the historic I-2 use. But now we have the Michigan Road overlay that applies as well. So we've got a couple things going on. I-2 generally permits really any kind of enclosed or open type of industrial use. I-1 is the category that's just a step below that it's typically more for indoor use. And then you have the Michigan Road overlay, which generally permits the underlying district uses with certain exceptions, one of which comes into play here, and that is the Michigan Road overlay does not appear to permit outside storage. Now, it doesn't say whether that's a primary use or accessory use. It just says no outside storage, except if you're going to sell or lease propane tanks. So it's difficult to reconcile all of that. Hence, part of the reason that we have a use variance pending before you tonight. Let me just give you a couple of uses that are contemplated in either I-1 and I-2, just to kind of help frame. And just looking at some of the things that Altum's does. Are they a plant nursery? Kind of. Yeah, they grow, they sell plants. That's permitted in I-1 and I-2 and in rural and in the Michigan Road overlay. Are they a commercial greenhouse? Not really, but that's a similar type of use in terms of what you might expect in I-1, I-2, and the overlay. Farm implement and equipment, not quite. Again, permitted in I-1, I-2, and the overlay. Farm, garden, and supply is really the kind of use that we've put ourselves in category-wise, and that is permitted in I-1, not I-2, and GB, business. Why do we care about general business? We really don't, except for the fact that the comprehensive plan for this area does contemplate commercial use, which could be general business. The bottom line is we think that what Altum's does, which is a variety of retail and service providing for homeowners that might need some help with planting, direction, things of that nature. You can buy on site, you can have stuff delivered and planted. They really kind of fit in exactly the kind of rural industrial type of category that is in play here. even though it does not fit neatly within the category of farm garden supply. They're a little more than a roadside sales stand. That's kind of been the temporary variance. So they're beyond that, building a permanent office, sales facility, and a storage barn. They're using existing curb cut off of Taylor. And in essence, we're just asking for permanent recognition for what has been granted twice. The latest temporary variance expires at the end of this year. Again, we appreciate the staff's recommendation for approval tonight. We stand by the findings of fact that were on file. I'm not going to do anything more than summarize them. This use will not affect the public health, safety, and welfare. It doesn't spew out anything. There's no real nuisance characteristics. The use or value of the areas adjacent are not impacted at all. We're really separated. We've got the winery event center on one side, the landfill on the other. We do have residential across the street. Those are truly adjacent. This will be a quiet use with regular hours. The ordinance, the peculiarity of the property is such that we're dealing with 2 acres, and that's on top of 0.7 acres that's currently being landed for I-2. That's an extraordinarily small parcel size. The ordinance, as I introduced, does have some conflicts in terms of allowing I-2, and then the overlay kind of overly restricting a lot of what I-2 can do. And then finally, we do think that this proposed use is comfortably within, if not squarely within, the comprehensive plan recommendation for commercial use. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I have Kirk Gibson with Altum's with me here tonight if you have any questions regarding this specific operation, timeline, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cauldron? Hearing none. Is there anyone in the audience or online who wish to speak for or against this petition? Thank you. Seeing none. We have a staff report, please.
Yes, thank you. I think Mr. Cauldron did a good job outlining that proposed uses will be less intense than what is currently allowed. This area does call for commercial in the comprehensive plan. Currently, Altum's has gone through 2 temporary type uses through the end of this year. It expires, and those of you on Plan Commission, this will be going, I think, in a couple weeks for a development plan. And one other point, I know sometimes with use variances, we talk about sunsets, and staff didn't feel like that was an appropriate request with this specific petition. With that said, staff is in favor of these 2 use variances and happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for staff? I would concur that this is a difficult one to think about, a use variance sunset period.
Yeah, Agree.
The investment that they're making would probably make that impractical. So, all right. Any discussion among the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that docket 2022-35-UV use variance supporting the use of farm and garden supply and outside storage located at 795 South US 421, the Rural General Industrial Zoning District I-2, and within the Rural Michigan Road Overlay MRO be approved based on the findings in the staff report as presented and described.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, good luck. Moving now to new business. The next item is docket number 2022-36-DSV K Muradian, It's a petition for a development standard variance to provide for an addition which exceeds the allowable lot coverage in the urban single-family residential zoning district, RSF2. And are you Mr.
I am David
homeowner?
Brumman,
You're the representative?
representative. I'm a contractor, Lakefield LLC, speaking on behalf of Brandon Meridian, isn't the audience, it's Kelly Meridian's husband.
Would you state your name for the,
David Brummagem.
thank you, David. If you would give us an overview of the
Yeah.
project that's proposed.
I apologize if I'm not as eloquent as the previous speakers. I am not an attorney by trade and do my best. And if I'm missing on any of the requirements of why this needs to be met for a variance, please ask me. I feel I can fill you in if I don't hit on them. The first, the reason why, I guess, is why we're here is to get the variance because we are currently on his lot for an addition at about 20%. The addition would up the lot coverage to 25%. We have not submitted to permitting yet. This is in advance of that, so maybe this is a situation where the wagon's out in front of the horse. But this would be in follow-up to getting approval on the variance that we would go for permitting afterwards. We are at 25%, and we would like to add, or with the addition, it would be 25%, and it would be a 600 square foot addition for 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 1 closet. The need for this is the Meridians are looking to expand their family. And they are in a housing development where all the houses look very similar. I think that their square footage is actually relatively small and compared to some of the other ones, if not one of the smaller house plans. They usually have 5, 6 house plans and something like this. And I think your square footage is one of the smaller ones. So the 600 square foot would maintain the surroundings. It would not blow anything out of the water. It'd probably fit right in. And the addition on the exterior side would be similar materials that are already on the house, same vinyl, same brick as needed. I guess part of the reason this came up was that we all suffered through the pandemic, and Kelly is now is working from home full time. So one of the bedrooms that was in the house that would have allowed for another family member is taken up by a home office that's required by her support. Brandon is a member of the, or not a member, he's an employee of Zionsville High School, teacher. He's part of ZLAX, the Zionsville Lacrosse Organization. And he's on the teachers union, the Zionsville Education Association. So he's very invested in the community, doesn't want to uproot, wants to stay here. And given the interest rates and the economics of housing, it's much better for him to stay here and do an addition rather than to try to relocate. So for those reasons, we are asking for a variance from the 20% standard to allow for the 600 square feet.
Thank you, Mr. Wigan. Any questions for the petitioner's representative? Hearing none, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak for or against this petition? Anyone online? Thank you. Seeing none, could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, I think the petitioner did a good job summarizing the request they're wanting to do in addition to the residence, which would make the lot coverage up to just under 25%, when 20% is the maximum allowed. While we've seen more frequent requests with the 20%, it's pretty common, the 20% lot coverage in different zoning districts. I will say, after doing research in this general subdivision, there's not a whole lot of variance requests. However, most of the lots are at 20% currently. I would suspect that as the subdivision ages, there might be additional variance requests for additions or anything like that. So with that said, staff is in favor of the request and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I would just say this lot from the aerial that we've got appears to be one of the smaller lots anyway, which hampers that percentage even further.
Sure.
Am I allowed to add still? I'm sorry. The other thing I would like to say is there's a large green space right behind this house. It's like 5 acres. So as far as just covering up green space, it really won't in my opinion, be very noticeable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that docket number 2022-36-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for an increase of lot coverage up to 25% for the addition of a bedroom, bathroom, and closet for the property located at 3763 Weatherstone Crossing in the urban single-family residential R-SF-2 be approved as filed based on the findings of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Postlewaite. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Good luck.
Done.
So, next item on the docket is number 2022-37-DSV petition for a development standard variance to provide for an addition to a single family home deviates from the required rear yard setback in the urban residential zoning district RV located at 745 West Hawthorne Street, Zionsville. Mr. Lanus, you're the representative.
Yeah, I'm Representative Mike Palmer with Carpenter's Crew. I'm a contractor that's been hired to do the project. And I wish I could plug my iPad in here, but I didn't bring that cord. So right now, there's an existing garage there that sets on the 5-foot setback on the rear of the property. Right now it unloads right into the alley. So you basically back out of the garage and you're in the alley. What we're proposing to do is slightly shift that garage a little bit to the east, just a couple feet, and then turn the loading so that it loads onto the property so you can back out of the garage and then turn onto the alley. The issue comes that we want to connect the garage to the house, which therefore we should be a 20-foot setback, not the 5. I don't know if you guys have the pictures in your packet of the existing porch. I mean, it's almost connected now, so to speak. And kind of the issue is they bought this house last fall and they're wanting to really invest in it. One of the big issues is, well, right now that garage, you have to leave the doors open to drain the patio to the alley. Whoever built it, it's got drainage issues. But the biggest issue is the original part of that house, I think they said was built in like 1865. So it's got a really steep set of stairs and it's a winding staircase. The rail's like 28 inches high. Well, they don't want to, there's really no good place to put a new staircase in that house. So we're proposing to add a elevator that would, service all 3 levels, then attach the house to the garage. And it would really turn it into a property that would have a lot of benefit for them. They plan to stay there, as long as they can. So without the ability, the hardship would be without the ability to attach the garage to the house and leave the garage basically in the location, we just can't get it. There's no room for the elevator. And then they really wouldn't want to make the investment without having the attached garage as well. So that's why we're petitioning. As far as the lot coverage, you saw it's a double lot. The other setbacks were well within.
It's only the one setback that is requesting, you're requesting a variance for. Any questions for the petitioner's representative? Any online questions? Okay, can you communicate with him and ask him if he is wishing to speak on this? No, okay, false hand up. No comments, then can we get the staff report, please?
Yes, so as the petitioner stated, they're requesting a rear yard setback for the garage to be attached versus detached. As it currently is configured, the garage is detached and about 5 feet from the property line. They're wanting to essentially keep the garage in the same place with an addition, which will be attached to the house. And also changing the configuration of the garage to be facing to the west and not towards the alley. Based on what the petitioner provided and the findings, staff is supportive of the request and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? This also will have an upstairs in the garage now, which we use as a living space of some sort.
Correct.
If there are no questions for staff, is there a motion?
Got it, you want me to get it? I move the docket 2022-37-DSV Development Standards Variance in order to provide for the addition to a single-family home which deviates from the required rear yard setback to 5. Which deviates from the required rear yard setback to 5 feet. What were you missing there?
Yes.
Yeah, feet. The feet is not in there, but it should be.
I thought we were, sorry, I thought we were actually moving it out of the setback. Am I not?
It has a 5-foot setback currently, and when it becomes attached, it needs a 20-foot setback, but it is maintaining the 5 foot. So therefore, it violates the setback.
There we go. Okay.
So you want to try that again?
So the motion made sense to everybody but me. Hence the reason I thought I should make it. All right. I move the docket 2022-37-DSV Development Standard Variance in order to provide for the addition to a single-family home which deviates from the required rear yard setback to 5 feet for the property located at 745 West Hawthorne Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RV, be approved as filed based on the findings of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted plans and concepts.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next item is docket number
It's just as I was reading, thinking at the same time, which is never-
2022-DSV
Never could.
6885 West Stonegate Drive. Petition for development standard variance to increase the number of continuous parking spaces to greater than 15 in the rural professional business zoning district. I assume you're the representative for this project?
Yes, sir.
And if you would provide us with an overview.
Certainly. My name is Adam Dehart, project manager for Keeler Webb Associates. Our offices are located at 486 Gradle Drive, Carmel, Indiana, 46032. I'm here this evening with Mr. Chris Tanner, who's a partner, not only in the business of Northwestern Mutual, but also the ownership of the property is 643 LLC. As you just stated, this particular structure is on the northeast corner of Stonegate Drive and Whitestown Parkway at the very extreme edge of Zionsville. In 2021, we made a presentation for site development plan approval for this structure. Like I said, it is currently under construction. The shell of the building's been complete and they're getting ready to start on the interior part of the construction. When we presented this project, Northwestern Mutual occupies approximately half the size of the office building there on the lot. And the property is, the use matches the zoning. We didn't ask for any variances during the site development plan approval process. Their particular business is not parking intensive, but they were looking for a tenant to join them in the building and fill out the rest of the building space. That prospective tenant has a high need for parking spaces, which is the reason for our request for the development standards variance that we have before you. Originally, the plan. I believe that in our packet, you have a copy of our landscape plan that shows the facility. The one addition from the original design is 4 spaces on the south side of that plan. So we've increased the parking lot from 26 to 30 spaces to accommodate the future needs of parking on site. So we aren't going to create an issue with anybody parking on the street or in anybody else's way. In order to do that, this is an extraordinarily small lot. As you can see, the entire lot's taken up pretty much with building and parking. It was designed to be in compliance with the ordinance, and it was approved and permitted as such. When we go from 26 to 30 parking spaces, it creates a continuous row of 16 parking spaces. The request for the development standards variance is a requirement of no more than 15. I can't get from 26 to 30 and then still have parking islands in there. Then I would be back to 28. It wouldn't meet our minimum parking requirement. That's the reason for our variance. We're here before you this evening in an effort to distribute that landscaping that would be lost to that interior parking space. We've worked with staff. We've relocated that landscaping that would have been required in the intermediate parking space to the perimeter so that the town and the owners get the benefit of additional landscaping that's still in compliance. It's just that we don't have that one additional interior parking island that we would not be able to park on. With that, we have in the packet findings of fact that we presented. We'd like to continue to stand behind that and ask that your vote is based upon that. Briefly, our parking lot expansion won't be injurious to public health, safety, and morals. The additional 4 parking spaces actually will increase this property's value and won't affect any of the adjacent properties in any substantial manner. And as you can tell, strict application of the ordinance wouldn't allow us to have this tenant move in. We'd have to look someplace else for this excess of 1 parking space in a row that we're requesting. With that, we request that you approve the petition as presented, and we'd be available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Any question for the petitioner's representative? We're unaccustomed to having requests for more parking spaces. Usually it's for less parking spaces. So
Understood.
I think Larry had, you have a question, Larry?
Can you tell us what the proposed tenant's going to be?
Not at this time, sir. I'm sorry, I can't.
So I would note, as a resident of Stonegate, I don't feel like this will be a problem, given the way it's screened by existing landscaping. However, if your core and shell were done, that'd be great. It's not done yet. So if you can speed that up on the construction, we'd love that.
I'm sorry, what?
The core and shell is not quite done, but if you could get that done, it'd be great. It's taken a while. So.
Core and shell.
Of your building. You noted your core and shell of the building is done. You're getting ready to do the build out. Core and shell is not complete, but if you could get that done, it'd be great.
I'm sorry, I do not understand what a core and shell is.
You noted that your shell of your building was complete in your presentation.
I understand what you're saying now.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
As a resident, it's just taken a while.
And
So
this particular project's been having the same problem everybody else does in the building industry with building materials.
but no, it doesn't affect visually anything. It's hidden. The parking's all screened from the road, from both roads, from Whitestown Parkway. Is that technically what it is out there? And Stonegate Drive.
Anyone here tonight that wishes to speak for or against this petition? Anyone online? Nope, thank you. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes. Petitioner said this project got plan commission approval, I believe it was last year, for the office building. They came back and are requesting 4 additional parking spaces, which you cannot have more than 15 continuous parking spaces. They're proposing 16. They have said that they will put landscaping that would have been in an island or such on the side of the property to accommodate for that. With that said, staff is in favor of this request and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is there a motion on this petition?
I'll get it. I move that docket number 2022-38-DSV Development Standards Variance for no more than 15 parking spaces without a continuous, or in a continuous row without landscaping. And with landscaping allocated to other areas as depicted on the site plan filed in docket 2022-38-DSV Exhibit 4 for the property located at 6886 West Stonegate Drive in the Rural Professional Zoning District, PB, be approved as filed based upon the findings of fact and substantial findings of fact and subject to the proposed commitments.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck. Next item on the agenda is docket number 2022-39-DSB. D. Carey at 11875 East 200 South Zionsville. Petition for development standard variance for a reduction in the buffer yard to construct an in-ground swimming pool in the rural agricultural zoning district, AG. And are you the Careys?
We are. I'm Laura Carey, and I'm so out of my wheelhouse. This is the first meeting I've ever been to like this, so hopefully we put together some good information for you and help you make a decision. Oh, great.
All set up?
Yep.
All right, if you give us an overview of your proposal, please.
Sure.
And start with your stating your names and address, please.
Okay. My name is Laura Carey, and I live at 11875 East 200 South.
Doug Carey, same address, 11875 East 200 South.
Well, I've lived here for 1 year after about 20 years in Colorado. And if I'm looking at my phone, it's just because I wrote notes because I'm really nervous. So I realized that we might not have any mountains anymore, but we have an amazing community here and I just love it. You guys have a very important job, which is the mindful development of this area, and I respect that deeply. Our kids have been part of this process to get here tonight. We are requesting a pool, and that is requesting a reduction of the buffer yard. I hope one day that they will appreciate the engagement in this process and learning from it. And maybe one day they'll be sitting in your shoes. So anyway, we certainly hope that we can move you to approve our pool, not for emotional reasons, but for very practical ones. There's about 80 pages of PDF that you have in front of you that you can also reference online, but I've tried to boil it down to just 8 pertinent slides. First, let's look at the first slide that we have up here. So I just want to point out a few things. The green box represents our property. If you for like 1 second just like squint your eyes and ignore all the verbiage, you're going to see a ton of green, and it's all concentrated on our property. And that's because of the very mature trees there. This is an 1887 farmhouse, and this old farmhouse once reigned over hundreds of acres of property in this area. Over the years, it has been whittled down to 1.89 acres. And I'd like to say that again, 1.89 acres. It's less than 2 acres. Coming from Colorado, that seems absolutely enormous. But in the context of this agriculturally zoned area, it is really very tiny. In fact, it's so tiny that I can't find a single other property that is less than 2 acres and zoned agricultural in our immediate vicinity. And that means that that sort of coveted precedent that I'd like to walk in and give to you so to make you make a decision more easily isn't really available to us. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Obviously, someone with 4 to 10 acres probably doesn't need to place their pool or accessory structure close to their property line. Like us, they want their pool close to their residence, and their residence is probably not near their property line if their property is so big. What I really want this board to understand is that what is driving this decision is safety. You can see from the picture here where our residence is, and just south of our residence is a detached yellow garage. The red line you see is the proposed line of sight. It starts at our residence, and there's sort of a beautiful porch where everyone hangs out, and in the summertime, that's where everyone is. And then did I skip to, let's look at slide 2. Nope, go back, sorry. No, I didn't, sorry. The garage you can see there, you can see the aerial view. You can see there's an existing barn there that's also very close to our property line, which represents a variance. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm getting off script, okay. You can also notice where the septic is and where the large mature trees are. And when I say large mature trees, I mean huge. You can literally throw a football under their canopy. And I don't think it's in anyone's best interest, Zionsville's or anybody's at all, to pull out large mature trees for a pool. It's expensive, time consuming, and not good for the environment. We just want a pool that can be constructed on this property and outlive us. We want it to be in the safest location as possible for obvious reasons. Okay, the second slide. This slide shows the proposed location. It's a bunch of gravel that we want to dig out, left by the previous owner. And you'll see it's bordered by an existing fence. So that fence that you see right there is the green line backing up to the horse pasture on this slide. So that's our property line fence right there. You can see just beyond it, it's beautiful horse property. And if you look, you can kind of see the top of our neighbor's barn. So they've heavily invested in their property for the use of horses. There's no potential for it to be used for crops or any other agricultural activity. So the real buffer between the proposed pool location and the real agricultural activity, it's about 2 acres. You'll see that there's an existing barn on our property there, barn, quote unquote, with a garage door. That barn sits 9.5 feet from the west property line. I understand it was permitted with Boone County in 2006 and finished construction in 2008 before our land was designated to Zionsville. And now I understand why there isn't a variance on record for this barn. But in terms of use, all of our construction on that side would be further away from the fence line than the existing barn. I mentioned the fence line to the south, which we were just looking at. And I wanted to mention that there's obviously no agricultural, or I understand that if there was no agricultural zoned buffer yard, that Zionsville would only require 5 feet. We're requesting that our pool concrete pad is slightly further than 5 feet, and the actual pool would be 9.5 feet from the property line. So that really just means that the closest usage is coming on is from the property line is 9 feet. Sorry, I'm probably going too fast, but this right here in this slide, that you can see the same line of sight, but you can see clearly that yellow garage that I'm talking about. This is a major visual obstruction from the residence to the pool.
If the pool were put behind the garage.
Yes, sorry. So for
Yes.
any other location, like when you're standing on our porch, you want to be able to see the people using the pool. And if you were to put it directly behind the garage, which is really the only other space not taken up by septic and whatnot, you wouldn't be able to see, it wouldn't be the safe location. And this kind of shows the old farmhouse, and it shows the porch location, and you can see the line of sight. It's kind of strange. You would think this is the side that faces the road, but it's not. It's the side that faces the south side of our property. All the high usage living area is right inside that porch. The kitchen's there, the dining area, the living space. That's where everybody is during the summertime. So we just want to be able to see our kids when they're swimming. All right, this next slide. So as part of this process, you can see our property. It's those red boxes, the 2 adjacent red rectangles in the center of the black rectangle. Again, I would just point out that our property is the smallest, and it's encompassed by these other properties. They're all properties used as their primary residences, and a few of them have horses and such, but they range from 4 to 13 acres. And one of them has recently constructed a pool. This in-ground pool was put in a year ago. This black rectangle encompasses the properties that we were asked to contact as part of the public notice process. And so I've just summarized what they wrote in, which you have on file. And I'll just go ahead and kind of read the pertinent ones here. But at the very top, you can see Did you guys all receive this today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it just says at the top there, the key things I underlined, it will allow them to adequately monitor and supervise the pool. As pool owners, we understand their desire to closely monitor the pool while in use. Another neighbor said that, they've all come over and they've seen the location. They said they've selected the best available location to place the pool. We agree that this is the safest location for the pool. We second the notion that the closest agricultural activity is acres away from the desired pool location. You can,
Which one's going there?
Bill and Ann, so you can see we sit inside the L-shaped property, and they're the ones that said, I want you to know they're at 11823, and they say, my husband and I are neighbors to the Carey family. They have a pool variance scheduled for tomorrow's meeting. We support the pool.
And that's the folks who live behind, the closest to us.
Who have the horses.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
So, given that we haven't lived here very long, I was really happy that so many neighbors took the time to write in support of our pool. We called them, we talked to them about the pool, we brought them over so they could see the site and understand our safety concerns. I'm very grateful to be part of this community, for sure.
Yeah, so there's the safety concern where we can't see the kids in the pool, and also if we had to put the pool behind that garage, which is the only other potential spot, we have to tear up the driveway. We have a circular drive, like a horseshoe. Tear up the driveway. We wouldn't have a circular driveway anymore, or a horseshoe driveway, and we have to tear up a bunch of trees and a bunch of grass in the yard. So it's kind of like that's just a no-go. But the safety thing is definitely the most important.
Yeah, and the other thing is I talked a little bit about this earlier about finding precedent, and I appreciate you listening to this because it's like the end of a long day, but I just kind of wanted to clue everybody into where this property is. It's like on the very, very, very eastern side of the Zionsville. It's in this very thin strip of agriculturally zoned property. And here's kind of the blow up of it. So you can see where it sits. Hamilton County is to our east, to our north, and to our northwest. And then residential is to our west and to our south. So there's like this thin strip of agricultural. So when I was asked or requested to like find some precedent, I searched high using Google Earth, and I'm just not an expert on this. I did find one I discussed with Suzanne today. It's just a basketball court, but she and I couldn't find a variance on file. So I don't know if this is just something that they did without a permit or did before they were part of.
The irony is the best precedent is our own barn, which sits just next to the property line. And when we saw that, we thought, oh, this is great. No problem, right? Putting a pool kind of similarly. And in fact, I called the city. I don't know who I talked to. And when I mentioned this, they said, so you're telling me the barn is less than 10 feet from the fence? I said, yes. And they said, then this shouldn't be a problem to put a pool in because you have precedent. And I thought, great. And we got the ball rolling, and here we are. So little did I know that it was apparently not under Zionsville's purview at that time.
So basically, you guys are more familiar with these rules than we are, but we set out to show that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. And I hope you can safely agree that that is true. We check that box. That the use and the value of the adjacent area will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. I hope you can easily see that there's no one that's going to be adversely affected from this. And that the strict application in terms of the zoning ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship in the use of the property, would result in the removal of potentially mature trees and the destruction of a U-shaped driveway, which kind of messes things up. It would most importantly mean that we can't see our kids when they go swimming. So we really hope that you'll consider our request for a reduction to property. So if we ask any of our questions, or the kids are prepared to answer any questions. Well, they submitted letters returning to the document, pages 54 to 56.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioners?
Is your exhibit 2 correct that your septic field is located to the northwest of your house?
Yep, we've
Yeah.
had someone come out, and we can actually provide.
Yeah, we had it mapped just to make sure, but the septic tank is there in that general area, and then they mapped the fingers recently, so we wanted to be sure where it was.
Yeah, we were worried it might be on the other side of the driveway, but it's not. So it's exactly where that septic is, and the tank is just below where that verge is. Closer to the house. Septic field is right there.
Could you tell me how many horses they have at the neighboring property? And,
Actually, Anna could probably tell you about it. 3. They might have sold one because they're looking to sell one.
right, so I see they have a dressage ring. Is it a training facility?
No, it's a single, it's just a woman and her husband. They don't even have kids and they're supporting our pool.
I understand. But horses are an agricultural activity. I mean, as much as-
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're just going in the spirit of the idea of agricultural crops and spraying and things like that. From what I read, that's kind of what it was going after. And their horses are just kind of their hobby, I think.
yeah, but do they have a spreader, manure spreader?
Do they have a manure spreader?
Yeah.
Their property is so well maintained and so impeccable. They've never bought it on mowing.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Manure.
I don't think they spread manure anywhere near. I'm sure they don't spread manure anywhere near our property. That is something that's 1,000%.
I mean, I'm out there in that general area. All my office is kind of in that area, and I've never seen.
But it's not uncommon. I'm a horse owner, so I'm speaking firsthand here. It's not uncommon to run a manure spreader along a fence line. It's one way to keep weeds and so on down
Huh.
around
No,
the fence, and so.
Yeah.
I've never seen them do anything other than mow, but I would be more than happy to follow up with
No,
her and have her
I'm-
write you an email.
I'm sure they have manure. If they have horses, they have
They
manure.
have-
It has to go somewhere.
I know, I mean, if you see the extent of their, I think a lot of that activity would go not in the pristine pasture that's right behind our house, but maybe behind their horse barn, if you can see on there. But again, I don't want to mislead you. I'd be happy to follow up on that point. It's a great one. And I'd be happy also, if there's some way we can mitigate any concerns or the original proposal, for instance, had the pool equipment closer to the fence line and we moved it back. So it's definitely everything's sort of where existing barn is.
I think also in your narrative, you mentioned that you did not want to use the green space that you have that does not have trees because that's where your children play.
That's where we wanted to put it. That's where we originally started to put it when we first moved. And then we had an arborist, which was just a lot of maintenance that wasn't done at that point when we first bought the house. And an arborist said, "You're going to put a pool here. You're going to kill this tree." We're like, "What?"
It's
And so
it's a
Catalpa.
100-year-old
It's not
Catalpa.
gorgeous catalpa or whatever. It's huge.
I asked them, I was like, "How many more years do people get out of this tree?" They're like, "We've got decades left in this tree. It looks great." And then I had another arborist come, and his letter, that arborist's letter is in our documentation, but I had one of his friends who's also an arborist did a treatment, and he concurred with that assessment. And then another arborist, I don't have it from them, I only have verbally, but Bartlett, something or other, they came and they said, "Yeah, you can't put a pool there. You're gonna, it will ruin the root system, which will ruin the house." And if you've seen it for that particular location, I mean, you see the tree, like, it's kind of very close to the house. You can see it to the left of the red dot there. It would destroy that cute, beautiful tree that's in perfect condition.
It's the one that's the most beautiful tree on the property, we think.
So I don't generally have an issue with the argument that you don't have agricultural, at least in the intent of the ordinance relative to spraying. So I don't have an issue with the decrease from that standpoint. I would caution you that you're not going to stand on that back porch and see your kids play in that pool. Their heads are going to be below the rim of the pool, and the glare on the pool, you will not see them. So if they go under, you're not going to know they went under. So from a safety standpoint, that's not a very safe place to put it. So you may, when they're on the deck, you'll be able to see them. But when they're in the pool, you will, as a former lifeguard, you will not see them.
I think that's a really great point. The only thing I might point out is that it's quite elevated, both the property and the elevation of the actual porch.
Right.
It does look down on that area, so you do actually have a pretty good line of sight. I can follow up with a video footage for you, so that I appreciate your lifeguard.
I mean, that doesn't change my perspective. There have been several people from Zionsville who've had their kids drowned or nearly drowned in the last 2 or 3 years who are still recuperating. And that is likely not as safe as you may think it is.
And yeah, I think another point is just keeping an eye on the general activity and craziness of the kids and what they're doing and the horseplay and all that. We can at least
Which will be way more visible than.
right
somebody
have a sense
actually
of
down
what they're
in the pool.
doing. And
Yes.
And, you know, our goal moving, one goal of many moving to Zionsville and Indiana in general, was to have a lot of people over. We have this great property, we have cousins, and the kids are making new friends, and not be able to see multiple kids playing in this pool. It's kind of, it's stressful to think about. And so that's part of it as well.
And part of the plan is there's like a little, what's called the thing? A pergola, like a place where you can sit that's in the shade. So our plan isn't to like sit from the porch and do that. It's just more if you want to run into the house, to grab a snack or something.
Sure.
I mean, our kids are all really strong swimmers, but there could be future owners, although I never want to move again. It's a big hassle. But you know, there for future owners, just good stewardship of the property. I think it's best to put it in a location that's not directly behind a barn. It would make me feel a lot better as a mother, and I just think it's a safer location overall. And additionally, it makes sense. It's just like gravel space that, you know, seems wasted at this point versus it seems silly to rip down trees when you don't need to. It's expensive, very expensive, as I found out, because we've had arborists come and like trim and whatnot. So to rip out these huge mature trees would just be probably like $5,000 to $10,000 would be my guess.
Well, I couldn't do it.
What?
I probably wouldn't do it.
Please.
We've been pretty consistent in maintaining the 40-foot buffer out in the ags areas.
Oh, did we go?
It's
through-
really about, you know, I'm looking at this horse barn and pasture and all that, and I'm thinking, I mean, how many horses could you put in that barn? If somebody really wanted to run an operation?
I don't know how big
They
it
have a
depends on how big a
dressage
barn
in
it
there,
is,
so
but
that's why they have an indoor dressage ring and
Yeah.
an outdoor.
so I mean, if something like that, essentially, if it has an indoor arena, then it could be a training facility and, you know, I mean,
But in the barn, it's obviously well past the fence line. It's
Correct.
not even-
But it's about, the reason we keep the buffer is just to confirm that your operations as running your residence don't impact the adjoining property owners. And we've commented on it every time we get somebody wanting to develop in the ag area, between the right to farm and making sure they keep the appropriate setbacks from the adjoining property lines. Now, that barn got built out there somehow, but we have run amok with things being previously approved by Boone County that now Zionsville is bearing the brunt for. That is a legitimate precedent. And, you know, once again, everybody likes their trees, but you're going to spend X amount to dig a hole. And if you got to take out a root ball with the hole, is what it is. But I do also agree with Chris. This does seem about as far away from the house, if you're truly all that concerned about safety, as it could be. Most people prefer their pools up tight to the house. Once again, for the use of restrooms and everything else. Let alone, you're going to have to run water lines and utility lines out there that are going to cut through the roots of all those trees out there, as well as trying to get underneath that driveway.
Well, no, there's electricity at the garage. It'll go right into the driveway. It won't impact any trees. We've already gone through this with an electrician.
Does the existing barn have restrooms in it?
No, it has electrical. So it could also be run from the barn.
Yeah. Does it have gas heat?
There's propane to the barn. And so that propane can easily tie in if we wanted to heat the pool. That's another nice thing about it. It's closer to the pool, the propane tank, and it's already going in the barn. So, and there's an electrical panel there as well.
where do
in the
you,
barn.
where is the well? I assume you have well water. Where is your well located?
The well is so see where that fence is and that little that those flowers,
Hostas,
the hosta flowers. It's right there, basically.
which if you were living. If you were looking, it would be like above the second G in garage, the lowercase g kind of up over there is where the well is. It's the distance.
Kind of left of the M.
Yeah.
for,
Yeah, we have
Mitchell.
up and left of the M. So that, yeah, we don't even know if the well will present an issue over in that area. We monitor it, but then there's a driveway there anyway. I don't even think I can make the setback on that side. So part of the problem is the house is in the middle, kind of the middle of the yard, which limits our options, let's just say.
Except, yeah, the house is, and all the living space in the house is in the back of the property, like I said before. So, you know, with all the existing structures, there isn't a lot of opportunity to put anywhere. This is a big, open, sunny. It's. You can come over for tea and I'll show you the best place. I promise you. And it's
There are no other questions for the petitioner. Do we have anyone in the audience here wishing to speak for or against the project? Or anyone online? Nope. Okay. All right, thank you. Could we have a staff report?
Yes, and also I definitely appreciate the amount of research and preparation that applicants have done here. As you may or may not know, the 40-foot buffer yard requirement can be waived by the building commissioner, who in this case was the former planning director. I'm not sure what he approves, what he doesn't. I mean, so it usually goes through the building commissioner to approve that. He had at the time denied the request for the specific waiver in the 40-foot buffer yard. And I think I provided that letter in the packet. His reasoning mostly was due to the fact that, yes, there are properties in the area that do not meet the requirement, but mostly they're agriculture buildings. They're either legal non-conforming or non-conforming, or possibly, I don't know if they got variances with Boone County. But there aren't any in the surrounding areas. I think that's what we look at. And in the area, there aren't really that many pools, and there aren't many pools that don't meet the 40-foot buffer. So with that, and being consistent with the former director's decision, staff had recommended denial of this petition. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So we're really not clear on what the former director denied this, what the basis was.
Well, I think the reasoning in the letter, the gist of it was that adjacent properties don't enjoy this specific request with the pool. I will say that, so I think it came up with one of your questions, that they did submit a building permit, because that's the action that has to be taken for the building commissioner to review. And they did get approval from the health department and the surveyor's office. Happy to answer any of the questions.
Any questions for staff? Hearing none, any more discussion among the board?
So Larry, I haven't had to my knowledge, I haven't had an opportunity to weigh in on a case with a 40-foot buffer yard since I've been on BZA. But it seems to me like the buffer yard should be more relevant to the flag lot next to it, the L-shaped lot that encompasses it, and not necessarily the backyard of the lot that is surrounded by the flag lot, given that there's really not crop agriculture, heavy farming. I get raising horses, I get manure, I get that.
So I'm just
I
saying,
mean,
Yeah.
if you read Wayne's letter, it's more about the spraying and overspray and those sorts of activities and having that buffer.
I was going to mention that. I do recall that in the letter and being
Yeah.
surprised.
And so that's kind of one lot removed. So to me, it was odd that the lot circled in green on here would have that buffer yard requirement, given that it was kind of two lots that were broken out. I would expect the buffer yard comment to stay
Well,
with
like I
the
said,
one lot.
once again, it's the problem we have every time we keep subdividing agricultural lots.
Yeah.
It's obviously was subdivided off of something else at some point in time. So, whatever the rules and regs that go with that subdivided lot, regardless of the size, it runs with the land. Secondly, when you talk about a 40-foot buffer, it's a 40-foot buffer for both properties, which keeps an 80-foot separation of uses. There's an established agricultural use, a horse barn, a dressage ring, a horse pasture. What's the two things that scare a horse? What's the two things that scare a horse?
Well, it depends.
Anything that moves and anything that doesn't, right?
But can I point out the picture I just brought up? You see the basketball hoop is there. There's a pickleball net laying on the ground. We're out there playing all the time anyway. We see the horses. They're friendly with the horses. We're all friendly with the horses. They come over, they eat grass. They're never jarred by us because they know us, but we're out there anyway. If they're going to get jarred by noise, it would have happened because the basketball games, the pickleball games, all the stuff going on out there, this is kind of the play zone. And it's the reason why it's great.
My concern is not that you're going to scare the horses. My concern is that having a pool in that spot so close to that property line will have an impact on the folks who own that other piece of property, who may decide they want to run their spreader out there by their fence line, because they would be, and I mean, it would just not be a nice thing for you to be in your pool if that's happening just on the other side of that fence.
I wonder if there's some kind of mitigation we could do.
To make that more comfortable.
Or different kind of fence.
Well, and the people that live there now may be fine with having a pool there, but at some point in the future, if there's a big horse barn there and a dressage ring and so on, you may have other folks there who have 10 horses instead of 3 or 2. And in which case that's a bigger operation, and you will see the impact of having those animals there. So I find that a little concerning.
I have to believe there's something we could do if that ever happened, right? There's some kind of mitigation. I mean, there's so many ways to protect a property against, this isn't airborne pesticides we're talking about. I just think that, if such a thing ever occurred, then that there has to be something we could do.
I mean, the thing you can do is put your pool somewhere where it's not that close to the property edge.
40 feet.
There's nowhere else to put it on the property.
There's a fair amount of property there.
Again, it just comes down to behind that garage.
It's gonna be behind the garage.
That's it. Everything else is going to have the same 40-foot buffer problem, even on the east side.
That's where it's going. If it can't go there, it's going behind the garage. That's not so great for future owners either.
Yeah.
So there's
Really
a-
meet number 3, that strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship in the use of the property. There's plenty of land there to put a pool. You just have to make a choice. Do you want a tree? You want a pool?
It's not that simple. I wish you could come see the property. But your thoughts.
Can I make a motion? I move that docket 2022-39-DSV development standard variance for the reduction in the buffer yard to construct an in-ground swimming pool at the property located at 11875 East 200 South, Zionsville, in the Rural Agricultural Zoning District, AG, be denied.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. We are split. We are a board of 5 members. 1 member is not here tonight. Any approval must be by 3. This is the split vote. Let's do a roll count. Mr. Jones, your vote?
Aye.
Mrs.
For the
Postaway?
denial.
Deny.
Mr. Lake,
4.
my vote is 4 as well.
So are you saying for the denial? Because that was what the
No,
motion was.
I am opposed to the denial. I am for approval.
So you are a
Um,
nay to my motion.
Correct.
That's correct.
We're both nays.
You both said for.
Yeah.
The motion was for denial.
And there are 2 yays, 2 nays.
There you go.
And my rationale is that I lived most of my youth in the country. You know, most of the time, you can always have a lousy neighbor. Most of the time, people get along well, tolerate one another, are respectful of one another. And if there's a time to have a pool, it's when you've got kids. As a former pool owner, trees and pools do not mix well. They are just make the work continual from about September onward. But they're still a great thing for kids. And there are ways, I think, to get around all of the concerns you heard. Remote cameras so you can see in the pool for the safety's sake. And again, trust that you're going to get along with your neighbors. But we have a split vote. And my suggestion would be that you request a continuance to next month. We will presumably have the 5th member here. One is not present at this meeting because a split vote cannot approve anything.
One last request. We can bring it next month. We worked so hard for a year to try to secure a contract. We've got a company that can start in 2 weeks. I really implore you to, I know you have these concerns, but as a parent, you put the nail on the head. We have to these days give kids something to do outside. It is so important. Everything we can do to get them outside is so important. And this is a promise, it's the best location on our property. I know there are horses there, and I know there will be future owners there. I don't. I just implore you to please just consider this so that we don't have to go through another one that costs 8%. It's I was like, so that kind of help us out in this younger.
Now, we are unable as a board to make a decision based on a split vote. The other thing our attorney just mentioned is making certain that we pick up your conversation there. You're standing away from the microphone, and so we may not be getting all that you have said. But I think from a standpoint of empathy and being able to do something that allows you to move in 2 weeks, unless one of us is willing to change that vote, and it'd have to be one of them that would have to change their vote. We can not do anything further tonight to approve that.
You can't, one more month is just one more summer down, that's all.
Do anybody want to reconsider?
Even if we move the location, we'd have to redo all the plans and.
Yeah, it would be the second summer without it.
Just to read for you, an indecisive vote, which is what this is, will be automatically redocketed and heard at the next regularly scheduled meeting. So it is not necessary to continue it, but if you wish to continue to pursue it, it would be redocketed for the August meeting.
Is there any chance of anyone changing their vote in the interim, having second thoughts, or it has to be at a meeting? That might sound silly, but.
Is there any?
Or what?
Any chance
No.
of someone having second thoughts and changing before the next meeting? Is that possible?
So, well,
As it stands at the
we meet
moment, no.
formally publicly, and so there is no in-between meeting in which that would happen. So unfortunately, I think our response to you is that it would be redocketed for the August 3rd meeting, when we would have 5 members here.
Thank you, we'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the docket is number 2022-42-DSB, A Worcester. 9180 East 350 South Zionsville. Petition for development standard variance to provide for an accessory structure which exceeds the permitted accessory square footage being greater than the primary structure in the rural single and two-family residential zoning district R2. Are the Worcesters here? Are the Worcesters online?
Oh,
Oh,
they're here.
Good evening, Mr. President. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
yes.
For the record, this evening, this is Matt Price. Thank you for the opportunity to appear remotely tonight. My address is 10 West Market Street in Indianapolis, Indiana, 46204. I'm here tonight on behalf of Al Worcester, who is the property owner. And I believe Mr. Worcester and his fiancee, Marcia Stone, are there with you tonight in the audience. I had coordinated with staff prior to the meeting to place my PowerPoint on the screen. And if I could ask them to do that for me, then I could begin my brief presentation and outline the nature of our variance request. Thank you so much.
All right, it appears that your presentation is now on our screen, Mr. Price.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mundy. If we could go to the first slide, just to orient you a little bit on the property and its location. The property has been assigned an approximate address today in the property tax records of 9180 East County Road 350 South. And Mr. Worcester purchased what you see there as parcel 1 and parcel 2 a little over a year ago. And it's parcel 2 that is the subject of the variance request tonight. It is an approximately 11.45 acre parcel. And we can go back to that prior slide. And then parcel 1, which is the northern parcel, is an approximate 10.72 acre site. You'll see in the bottom of the depiction of parcel 2, we have kind of a white rectangle, and that is the approximate location of the home that Al and Marcia intend to build on parcel 2, and which is the subject of the variance. And let me just say, if we go to the next slide, let me just say kind of in technical terms why we're required to seek this variance. And it is the product of this, which is that Mr. Worcester would like to build a home which includes a 2-car garage, substantial outdoor covered porch areas, and some significant additional storage space for equipment that he will use to improve the property, maintain the property, and enjoy many of the natural features that it includes, which are being immediately adjacent to Lake Elrod. It also has substantial woods, which has really not been well maintained over the last several years. There's a lot of underbrush that Mr. Worcester is using his ownership as an opportunity to clean that property up. And then it also has on its western side an open meadow that when mowed, as Mr. Worcester's been doing of late, is really a very nice meadow piece of property as well, and available for not only its aesthetic beauty, but also use and enjoyment as an open space. And the way the town counts the various accessory components of a building, they include the covered canopy areas, the garage areas, so a typical 2 or 3-car garage, plus the additional storage areas, irrespective of whether those areas are in the primary dwelling structure itself or whether they're separate, located in separate accessory structures. So when you add up all the various accessory components, although all located in the single primary structure, they exceed the square footage of the dwelling space itself. And so that's what necessitates the variance. I will say that this is a rural property zoned R2 under the town's rural standards. There are R2 properties in the immediate vicinity of this land which have structures which exceed, that the accessory uses on those properties exceed the square footage of the dwellings on those properties, and that's noted in the staff report. It's unclear to me whether that is because when those properties were in the county's jurisdiction that there was simply a different interpretation or perhaps less strict enforcement of how accessory components were added together. Certainly, I think in my experience in the town of Zionsville, at least historically, the comparison traditionally has been whether the square footage of accessory structures, meaning structures other than the primary structure, whether the square footage of those accessory structures exceed the square footage of the primary structure, as opposed to what we're doing now, where we're actually breaking out and dissecting each of the component parts of a primary structure, adding the parts that are considered accessory, and then comparing them to the square footage of the dwelling space. So it's a very strict standard and results in the need for the variance here. And so I appreciate moving to this slide because it's a perfect timing. I wanted to just kind of outline the various component parts so you get a sense of the structure. The yellow shaded area is the dwelling space itself. So the area where we have bathrooms, kitchen, dining area, bedrooms, uses of that nature. The green area is the two-car garage portion of the structure. The blue area is the covered outdoor porch and canopy area that is included and is labeled as accessory under the town's standards. And then the purple area is what we've identified as the additional storage space for equipment primarily, and perhaps another vehicle that Mr. Worcester would like to maintain or house at this location as part of the use and enjoyment of the land. If you go to the next slide. I apologize, go back a couple of slides. I want to highlight a couple of things. Here are the elevations of the property. Moving first the northern elevation at the top, then the southern, and then the west and east. The structure itself is going to be well screened from adjoining properties, high quality residential design. Al and Marcia bought this property with the idea that they would use it and enjoy it for its outdoor living and recreational aspects. And so that's really driving the need for this variance. We believe we meet each one of the findings in that it has no adverse impact on adjoining properties because it is well screened and proportionate, as is noted by the staff in its report as far as scale, and is consistent with how other R2 properties in the immediate vicinity are themselves developed. So it's not out of character at all with the area. And then the other point I wanted to make with regard to the findings is that the hardship is an interesting one in this case, because the R2 zoning classification anticipates that there are outdoor recreational uses and even farming uses that are permitted within that zoning classification, and yet the ordinance, as applied in its most strict fashion, does not make an allowance for any additional garage or storage space that might be directly associated with the nature of the land, as is present here, where it's heavily wooded, adjoining a lake, and may necessitate additional equipment and additional just recreational toys, if you will, that require a place for their storage to enjoy the full benefit of the property. I would be available to answer any questions that you have, as would Mr. Worcester. We appreciate your consideration tonight and would respectfully request approval of this development standards variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Any questions for the petitioner's representative or the petitioners?
Well, this is just, another kind of classic situation where alternate living, arrangements kind of outrun traditional zoning descriptions. Yeah, you all remember when zero lot line came through. That was kind of new. We've got the micro house that's out there bubbling around. So this is a prime example of something I've heard of here lately called the barndominium, where a residence is built that has a larger accessory use attached to it. Rachel, my property manager, was out at somebody's new barndominium just this weekend, and they had a fine time out there. But yeah, so obviously we need to up our residential zoning districts to begin to maybe define the barndominium.
New trend. Huh?
The new trend sweeping America. Yes.
We have been asked to design one. It's a thing.
Well, I'd look at it as a large garage, Larry, which would be fine with me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the challenge that I've had is just what is considered an accessory use. Porches and patios that are attached to the house, and they're part of the primary footprint. And so the goal was that the accessory building doesn't look like it overwhelms the primary, but if the porches are attached to the primary, then they're not really accessory. And so I've always had an issue with how we draw that line. So for me, it's not really, I guess, a big deal.
Well, we frequently get requests for pole barns, not attached to the home, but dominant in terms of size.
Yeah.
And it's not an unusual request in the rural areas. Yeah. So, well, are there any questions for Mr. Price or for the Worsters? Hearing none, is there anyone here who wishes to speak for or against this project? You would state your name and address, please, for the record.
James Troyer. I'm at 8980 East 350 South. If you could go back to Matt's first slide that shows the two lots. My family and I live in the property. You see the bottom of those two posts there? We're right there.
The development immediately above that.
The little green square at the bottom left of the property.
Oh, bottom left. Okay.
That's us. And Al and Marcia have generously informed us through the whole process what they're doing. They seem to be very good stewards of the area. We have deer, every imaginable, well, not every imaginable, all kinds of critters out there, right? And we like the trees, we like the animals, and they genuinely seem to be wanting to be good stewards of that. And so we wholeheartedly support their request for this variance. We're looking forward to having some neighbors that are doing something with that land.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for the Ronstader? Thank you very much. Anyone online? No one online. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Price did a nice job summarizing the request. The petitioner is requesting to build a residence with attached accessory structures that will exceed the size of the residence. Surrounding properties in this area show that there are some accessory structures larger than the primary. I'll also note that the property, they own both parcels, which is over 20 acres, and at 20 acres, there are no minimum, or I'm sorry, maximum accessory square footage cap. And based on the scale of it all being attached, staff has no issue and is in favor of the request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move the docket 2022-42-DSV Development Standard Variance to provide for the accessory square footage to exceed the primary up to 3,830 square feet at the property located at 9180 East 350 South Zionsville, Indiana 46077 in the rural single-family and two-family residential zoning district R2 be approved as filed based on the findings of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans and concepts.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So this will be the first barn dominium
Barn dominium.
in Zionsville. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the board.
That brings us to the end of our agenda. We will have
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Please wait for the signing of that last document coming down.